Welcome back to the podcast. We are in early July, and if I were to compare what I thought would be, or where I thought I would be as far as progress on the cabin build, I am behind-ish. Things have taken longer than I thought, and knew that was going to happen, so I kind of built that into the schedule. So there was like a best case scenario with the build and more like realistic approach. So I got a buddy and his dad coming up. They want to be involved in it, which is cool. And his dad hasn't been up here. Danny's been up here a couple times and he's been fishing and he came up to the wedding. So he's been up here a couple times and as he put it, he is looking forward to new inputs, and he has never built anything. So building a remote cabin or helping to build a remote cabin in Alaska is something that is definitely up his alley. And his dad has a mechanical mind and an engineering type mind. So it's going to be a pretty unique, sweet experience. It'll be rainy, but that'll be pretty fun. So that's been a huge part of the last couple weeks, getting out there. And I have not recapped the trip to Bristol Bay, which is crazy. My entire fly fishing life, I've wanted to get to Bristol Bay to fish, and I never thought I would. It just some areas are really difficult to figure out how to DIY. You can't really DIY because it's not developed to the point where you can road trip out there, put in float, and then get picked up somewhere, or just pick your own way along the river, figure it out as you go, figuring out how to get there, where to stay, and all those things. And the lodges that are the most advertised are really expensive. And so, I don't have an extra $8,000 to $10,000 to burn. So I just never really thought that it would work out, but it did end up working out. If you look hard enough and you ask around and things can work out. So it was a dream come true. And that's not, over exaggerating right there to head up to Last Chance Lodge on the Kvichak River and fish there. It was just pretty incredible. But as with any trip, there are some things that, like, the fishing is the main point, but there's some other elements that kind of make it interesting. And when I went up there on June 6th, I can't get to there, or you can't get out there in one day from where I'm at. So I went Kvichak to Anchorage, and I stayed the night in Anchorage and was able to hang out with Brandon from Alaska Wild Project, which is pretty sweet. Went out there and went to F Street Station, I think. F Street Station is the name of the place. I guess my go-to place. I got a really good halibut sandwich there, so I got the halibut burger. Talked to some tourists from back east. It was a lot of fun hanging out with them. But I was flying out of Merrill Field, which used to be the airport until Anchorage became such kind of a hub of travel, especially cargo. And so Ted Stevens was built, but Merrill was still very busy. And I was flying Dena'ina Air from Anchorage to Igiyagig. And so I had the night in Anchorage, and it was sad walking around downtown Anchorage and just seeing kind of the two parts of the town. You have the tourist infrastructure, and you have the interesting history, and you have all that great attractive elements of downtown. But then also, there are elements of it that are just kind of unsafe, and it's an unfortunate situation for a lot of people who are homeless, and those interactions with people and how it feels or can feel unsafe. And that was really unfortunate. When I was walking from my hotel to downtown, and this was 5 or so in the evening, so plenty of light. As I was walking past the "Welcome to Anchorage" sign, as you're kind of coming into town there was a guy just peeing right behind it. So, like, it was just this perfect sort of welcome to Anchorage. This place is not kind of what it was. And everybody laments that. And everybody says, oh, things used to be better. In a lot of cases, that's hyperbole. But in a lot of cases, it's also right. There are some prominent bars that have shut down, restaurants that have shut down because, you survive COVID, but then, the price is too high, or people aren't going downtown as much, and you have a lot of tourist traffic in there, but maybe the locals aren't going down there as much. So there's a lot of things that are kind of working against downtown Anchorage right now. And that's pretty sad because, Anchorage it is Alaska, as much as people that don't live in Anchorage kind of call it Los Anchorage, and, don't really consider big city Anchorage really part of Alaska. It definitely is. You go and you meet people there, and they have unique experiences, and pretty much everybody who can has a pilot's license. So it's a really cool place to visit. I definitely enjoy my time there because I have some friends there. But it was kind of sad to kind of be there and see that. So got out to Igiyagig on the next day, and the trout season was starting the following morning. So we went out at midnight just to cast a couple just because it was the opening of the trout season, didn't get anything, and then went back to bed and slept for a little bit. But that started the schedule of just grinding. And I was going to bed as early as I could just to kind of give the family some family time, then me some sleep time, and then waking up early to fish. And the water's so clear and beautiful, and just looking around, and you look upriver and you see this lake, but it looks like the ocean. It's just so massive. I'd never had an experience like that where the lake is just so big. I've been to Lake Tahoe and you look across and you can see kind of, it just has a different lake feel, where this feels like it's an inlet of the ocean, or the outlet of the ocean, because like the ocean's draining, obviously, because I'm looking upriver at Lake Iliamna and then beyond Lake Iliamna, but just pristine water, super clear, beautiful. And then the trout just looking like steelhead, because the river's so pure. The backs of the fish blend in with the rocks, and then the sides are just this silver. They make it look like a chrome fish, and they follow the sockeye up the river. They have the largest, or the Kvichak has the largest run-up sockeye in the world. So they follow the sockeye up into the lake, and then up further into the tributaries, and then lakes that are further up there in that huge area that would be impacted by Pebble Mine, which is just, it's incredible to think that that's still on the table. And there's all those through multiple bumper stickers now, because there's always people who are investing in the possibility, if the right political climate exists, to be able to get that to happen. And it just seems like that will never come, but there's always just enough people who are keeping it alive and continuing to invest in this thing, which is a wild investment to be putting so much money into the possibility of this. And people who are still putting in millions of dollars to try to make this thing happen, and keep encouraging and keep pushing and keep with the advocacy for it. Like, man, it doesn't seem like it's logical, but there's just a lot of scary things happening with that, and the fact that it's still alive is pretty concerning. So, the largest run of sockeye in the world, makes the trout really happy. They follow them up there, and then they winter over in the lake, and then they push down into the river in the early June, mid-June, as the fish start to come up again. They're in the water, in the river, and then they follow up with them. So rather than go out to the ocean, they just kind of stay in the lake. And so they're steelhead-sized rainbow trout, and they're huge. And typically, if you get those spring trout, they kind of have this lean look, or this, it's been a long winter. They're kind of thin, torpedo-y, but these just were strong fish. None of them were really like fat, but it's just super strong, beautiful fish. And right off the bat, we saw some feeding early in the morning, and Dagan was saying it's called smolting, when there are the small salmon fry that are in the river, and the trout will look like they're feeding on the surface, like they're taking like a bug on the surface, but it's actually the follow through from eating the smolt that are in the area. So it looks like a feeding frenzy, but it's all subsurface. And so we're throwing some smolt type patterns and leeches, articulated leeches, and got some fish right off the bat. And I don't think I caught a fish that was smaller than 16 inches, which is cool to have such a great average. And knowing that there's, mid 30s possible was pretty wild. But I just wanted I kept my expectations at like a couple 2-footers would just be an incredible thing. And I caught my first one that was about 24, 25 inches on the first day. So the first day was just incredible, epic. And then the second day was a little bit slower. There are definitely some boats around. You are in remote Alaska. You can feel it. There's no cell phone reception. Even like once you leave most lodges, like it just ends there. The Wi-Fi ends there, and there's no cell phone reception. So you do feel that element of isolated when you're flying in. There's nothing else around, very little infrastructure. You definitely feel like you are in a village. This lodge is just right across the river from the village. You can see some of the houses on this little bluff across the river, but you are remote. And then around the corner comes, another boat and a couple anglers. There's a couple DIY places, a couple other lodges, and then lodges they have some float planes, and so they'll fly you to different rivers, which is interesting. So you could be on the Naknek River, and then they could fly you over to the Kvichak to fish for rainbows, which I thought was pretty wild. So if you're staying at one of these lodges, you might not be committed to the river that you're on. You might fish the river that you're on for something, and then fly somewhere else to a different river for a different experience, which is definitely why the price is what it is. Having those options, because you're doing, maybe a different fly out per day, which is incredible and baked into the price, and which is why it prices out so many people. But it's an incredible experience if you're able to do that. And if you're an angler, like Bristol Bay area region is on your list. Where you have to figure out how to get there, how you're going to manage a fly fishing life without visiting at least once. Like Alaska for sure, Bristol Bay absolutely, especially if you're a trout fisherman. But yeah, the Last Cast Lodge is awesome. It was super nice to have that family owned feel. There's four of them that were there. Indy talked with his sons about buying it, and if you listen to the last episode, you get a lot more of the background there. But just having those four there was just it was like being at a friend's cabin. And to their credit, they didn't buy the property and then just go way into debt and then have to go full bore and go full bookings in order to pay off all the money that they sunk into it. So they're being very purposeful with it. And as they say, it's like a cabin, or it's 10 acres that came with a lodge. And so it's, a 50-year-old structure. So there's some of those, things that you would assume that would come with a 50-year-old structure, but it was super homey, super like it met me where I'm at. I haven't really stayed at a lodge before, like in season big lodge. So it was a super fun experience, super great experience, very warm experience, and we're here to fish type experience. So it was a lot of fun to be there. And then the afternoons, come home for lunch for a little bit, then get back out there. And then the evenings after we're done fishing, having a good meal and then talking about fishing or whatnot. And just, it was a lot of fun, great experience. I think the biggest, as far as fishing goes and realization, was just the pairing of fly fishing gear and making sure that you have the right setups. I have a switch rod, Echo switch rod, which I like, and I've used kind of the generic switch line from Rio, which is it's pretty decent for a switch rod, and for my two-handed purposes, I usually just use it for like high sticking, or even for when you get down to your drift, like, because here in southern Southeast Alaska, we don't have these big rivers where we have to cast a long way necessarily. It's mostly kind of heavy rigs to get down a lot of these slots. And so you're not really fishing the drift or the swing so much as you're trying to get a good drift. And in some of these deeper slots, you're fishing under an indicator. So the two-handed rod is nice because at the end of the, like, you drift the slot and then it does swing, you strip a couple times, and you can do this like two-handed overhead, just reposition everything in one huge swing. You don't have to do a back cast, or if you do a roll cast, you have extra feet, extra leverage to be able to really get a good roll cast out there with a heavy rig. So that kind of my general purpose with the switch rod. And I haven't done spay casting with the switch rod. So getting the right setup and getting a good shooting head and a good running line and casting the Beulah setup that Dagan had up there was crazy. And I kind of know how to spay cast, but without the right line, it just doesn't really work. You can't just get a spay rod, put any old like a Rio Gold or like a very generic line in there and expect to have those good results, because you have the good leverage, but you have to have the right line that's going to be able to shoot it out there. So the clumsy snap T casting I was doing with my switch rod worked-ish for me, but on this larger river, I was having to work really, really hard on that first day to get out there to where the fish were. Because there was plenty of back casting room, I could just readjust my line and do a two-handed back cast and then go shoot forward. But that's just a lot of extra work. And so fishing with his switch rod and just doing a traditional snap T and having the line bomb out there, I thought, man, this is crazy and so much more efficient. And so I talked to him about the lines and the line setup and what he uses. And so if you check out the YouTube channel, he breaks all that down and then talks about the double spay technique and then the snap T. So check out the On Step Alaska YouTube channel. You can check out that video. Very informative and really awesome. So as soon as I got home, I bought like the really good top setup line wise for my switch rod. So I think it's going to get way more performance out of my Echo switch rod than I had before. And I'm pretty excited for that. There's a couple rivers or a couple sections of rivers where I'll be able to really kind of use that. For the most part, still, it's not really big swinging water. So spay rod and here in the Southeast, especially on the rivers down here. Prince of Wales catch can isn't really needed. There's some spots where you can have it, but a switch rod is pretty nice. So to be able to effectively use that switch rod is going to be pretty fun now with this good line setup. So that was pretty fun. Day two was a little bit, I wouldn't say a struggle, but a little bit slower, which was nice because you don't want to, if the fishing is too good, then it's kind of ridiculous. You want to also feel like you have to work for it. Like the fish aren't, total pushovers. But yeah, it was just pretty consistent. It was tough at times. There's some dry spells, but you just stick with it because at any point you stay focused and you're going to be rewarded. So it was a lot of fun, and it was nice that there was time too to just kind of catch a fish and then sit down and just kind of take it in, drink it in, enjoy the runs on the river in the boat too. Because I've learned that these trips go really fast when you go somewhere cool. We did a day trip to fish the Umpqua in Oregon when I lived in California, and we drove up there and got there almost at midnight, and then fished the next day. And it was just such a frantic experience that I have no memories of actually fishing. It was just this frantic, I want to catch a fish while I'm up here, and we spent way more time driving than we did fishing. And then did a Montana road trip, and same sort of thing. We were there for like 4 or 5 days. But it was just quick. There was a lot of driving, and there was just a lot. It was just very frenetic, and I didn't have a lot of those times to kind of sit down and enjoy it. And that's the only way you can kind of slow down time, is to not just be nonstop casting and waiting for the next one, and do like the fish body count and how many fish am I catching and what are all the measurements of all the fish and getting a picture of every fish. I think it's nice to, I took a picture of a couple of fish, of course, but just to really experience the entire everything and appreciate, the watershed, and just know that in, 10 years or so, if Pebble Mine goes through, like, this is one of the last experiences that people might have with this. And it's talking with Indy and the Waltons about the average size of sockeye. So yeah, the sockeye have been returning in massive numbers, but the fish are much, much smaller. And a lot of the fish are, like kokanee sized. And so you're fishing not for big sockeye, you're fishing for sockeye that are more the landlocked kokanee type sockeye. And that's worrisome. So there's just a lot of things that really encourage you to sit down and really enjoy the experience and not be so much about the body count or the numbers that you lose track. So I definitely kept track of the big ones in my head and took some pictures for sure. But there are other elements of that really kind of leave their mark on the experience, which is really important to do, and which I've gotten better at. I know it sounds like I'm getting old or I'm getting overly poetic, but I think that's something that just enriches the experience. You want big fish. You want as many fish as possible. Of course, you don't want to go 3 hours without catching a fish, but it doesn't ruin the trip. You don't get frantic. Start freaking out, because that's another way to make time go really fast. Is if you start to panic about not catching the fish that you thought, or expecting a 30-incher because you're in Bristol Bay. This might be the last time that you're there, and you start to kind of lose your mind that way. So really enjoying it and appreciating the fish, because some of those fish were the biggest fish I'd ever caught, which is great. I've caught steelhead, they're bigger, but because these are rainbows, not as big. And then a cool moment, my stepdad passed away in April, and he'd given me a 4-weight bamboo rod that he built, and I hadn't really used it. I'd taken it out, but I hadn't used it because I was kind of in the, bamboo rods are fragile, and, in Alaska, where are you going to use a bamboo rod? But I took that up there, partly because he'd passed away, and I just figured a grayling or a rainbow on that would be great. And knowing that the leader would probably break before the rod would, I think that's, people think you're going to hook a big fish and you're going to break the rod. Well, if you're fishing with 30-pound test on a light rod, and yeah, you hook into a huge fish, it might break the rod, but the leader is going to break before the line did. So I used that bamboo rod, and it was awesome to cast something that isn't powerful. It's just kind of beautiful, and it was fun to cast versus trying to bomb out cast with a snap tee on a switch rod. So there was an inside seam pretty close to the lodge, and just used some couple of dry flies, and it was just a cool bamboo rod dry fly experience, and caught a couple fish in the 14 to 16-inch range, and that was just really cool. There's an old Lamson Click and Paul reel that I was using that obviously was Tom's, and so it was really cool to kind of pay homage to him and pay respect to him. It would have been something that he would have loved. I mean, I think he would have liked the fact that there was the chance of hooking into a a 2-foot fish, with that 4-weight bamboo rod that he made. So that was a cool experience too, and that will be as memorable as the bigger fish that I caught. But yeah, I think that pretty much sums it up, man. It's hard to get to these places, and it is super expensive, and there are ways, I don't know, like you save up money and do it, make it happen, sacrifice other things, to try to figure something out. It doesn't have to be expensive lodge, but there's some ways you can kind of try and make things happen. But yeah, just take advantage of opportunities. And if people ask you to go, man, it's just, you got to go. If someone invites you to go to Montana, or someone invites you to go on a trip to somewhere, you just got to go. Like, you got to figure it out. You got to go. So yeah, I guess that would be advice if there is any to give. But that'll do it for the Bristol Bay recap. If you do want to keep following and getting involved, Trout Unlimited obviously is a leader in advocating for Bristol Bay and for wild areas, backcountry hunters and anglers. They have people who are at they know exactly what's going on. They know what's going to be effective, as far as like what you could do, what are some good action steps. Posting stuff on Facebook sometimes isn't the best thing, or what part of the conversation is best. And so kind of reaching out to those people about how can I be of use, or what can I do that's going to be effective to help preserve and save these lands. Because even if 10 years ago, I thought I never would have gotten to Bristol Bay, and so I was kind of passively, or I was aware of Pebble Mine. I didn't want it to happen, but in the last couple of years, it's like, man, I might never get there, but it's the principle. These sort of places that need to be protected. Like, a foreign mining company gets to go ruin it like that. I'm not. That's not great, which is, again, created this sense of urgency to get there, just in case it does get ruined, either ecologically or with our addiction to technology, which, again, obviously I'm using a laptop computer, and I'm using, these things that require copper and a lot of these precious minerals, but just because we need them in our cell phones and our laptops and everything doesn't mean that we could just destroy these beautiful places just to get it. So there's a lot of things that go into this. And again, talking with people who are involved in this and know the messaging and the marketing, what's going to be an effective way of getting that message across, is going to be powerful for voters and to help out politically. So we'll call that this episode. Thanks again for listening. Appreciate it, and talk to you next time. Thanks for listening. Please like and share. If you found today's conversation useful, you can go deeper with my writing on Substack. That's where I expand on these ideas from the show, share essays, reporting, and things I'm thinking about in real time. You can find it at From the 49th on Substack. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you next time.